Imagine planning the perfect getaway, a serene escape to a cozy camping house surrounded by nature's beauty. But what if your dream retreat turned into a living nightmare? These camping house horror stories will make you think twice before venturing into the wilderness. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we'll uncover 3 spine-chilling camping house horror stories that will leave you questioning your next outdoor adventure. So grab a blanket, turn off the lights, and let's dive into these terrifying tales. Story 1, The Knocking in the Night by Matt Callahan. Matt Callahan and his girlfriend Lisa had always dreamed of escaping the chaos of city life for a peaceful weekend in the wilderness. The couple booked a rustic camping house deep in the Appalachian Mountains, an isolated retreat surrounded by towering trees and breathtaking views. They were excited to disconnect from their busy lives and immerse themselves in nature, far from the distractions of modern technology. The camping house was everything they'd hoped for, small but cozy, with a wood-burning stove, simple furnishings, and large windows that framed the dense forest outside. The nearest neighbor was miles away, which suited them perfectly. They spent their first day hiking nearby trails, taking photos of the vibrant fall foliage, and collecting firewood for the evening. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the pair lit a fire in the outdoor pit, roasting marshmallows and sipping hot chocolate. The crackling flames and distant sound of crickets filled the air, creating the serene atmosphere they'd been longing for. When the fire died down, they retreated indoors, falling asleep to the gentle hum of the forest. Around midnight, however, Lisa was jolted awake by a strange noise. It was faint at first, just a soft tapping sound. She lay still, straining to hear over the pounding of her heart. The tapping grew louder and more deliberate, unmistakably coming from the front door. "Matt," she whispered, shaking him awake. "Someone's at the door." Matt groggily sat up, blinking in the darkness. "It's probably just the wind or an animal," he muttered, trying to reassure her. Still, he grabbed a flashlight from the bedside table and made his way to the door. When he opened it, the night outside was eerily silent. The flashlight beam revealed nothing but the empty porch and the dense woods beyond. Relieved but slightly unnerved, Matt closed the door, locked it, and returned to bed. But the peace didn't last. At 2 a.m., the knocking resumed, this time louder and more insistent. Lisa clutched the blanket tightly as Matt once again approached the door. "This is getting weird," he muttered under his breath. He opened the door quickly, hoping to catch whoever or whatever was outside. But there was nothing there. He stepped out onto the porch, scanning the area with his flashlight. The beam caught the faint outline of footprints in the dirt, leading from the porch steps into the woods. The sight sent a chill down his spine. "Lisa, come look at this," he called. She hesitated but joined him, gasping when she saw the prints. "They weren't there earlier," she said, her voice trembling. They decided to lock all the windows and doors, placing a chair under the doorknob for extra security. The couple huddled together, too afraid to sleep. As the hours crawled by, the knocking seemed to move around the house. First it was on the front door, then the windows, and even the walls. At one point, Lisa thought she saw a shadow move across the window pane. But when she looked again, it was gone. The most chilling moment came around 4 a.m. when the knocking stopped abruptly. They waited in tense silence, unsure if the intruder had left or was planning their next move. Then they heard a low, guttural sound, a growl unlike anything they'd ever heard. It sent shivers down their spines. Just as Matt reached for his phone to call for help, the battery died, leaving them in total isolation. With no cell service and no way to contact anyone, they were completely alone. When dawn finally broke, the noises stopped as if they'd never happened. Gathering their courage, Matt and Lisa stepped outside to investigate. The footprints were still there, but now they circled the house multiple times before disappearing into the woods. The couple packed their belongings in record time and left the camping house, vowing never to return. Though they tried to rationalize the experience, perhaps it was a prank or an animal, they couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister had been watching them. To this day, the memory of the relentless knocking and the ominous growl keeps them awake at night. Whatever lurked in the darkness that night remains a terrifying mystery. Story 2, The Vanishing Lights. Claire Dumont. Claire Dumont had always loved camping, but her solo trips were becoming less frequent as her life got busier. Determined to reclaim a piece of that old adventurous spirit, she booked a remote camping house on the edge of Cascade Lake in Idaho. It was early spring, and the promise of crisp air, quiet waters, and time to reflect alone was exactly what she needed. The camping house was a small, one-room cabin, nestled among tall pines, with a wraparound porch that overlooked the glimmering lake. There was no electricity, no Wi-Fi, just Claire, a lantern, and her journal. She spent her first day hiking along the lake's edge and enjoying the peaceful isolation. As the sun began to set, Claire returned to the camping house and prepared a small meal. With night falling, she lit the lantern and settled on the porch with her journal. The air was cool, and the only sound was the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore. For the first time in months, she felt at peace. Just as she began to write, she noticed something odd across the lake, a faint light flickering between the trees. It was soft at first, like someone holding a candle, but it didn't seem to move like a typical flashlight or lantern. She squinted, trying to make out its source, but it vanished before she could get a better look. Shrugging it off as a trick of the light, Claire returned to her journaling. An hour later, as she prepared to head inside for the night, she saw the light again. This time it was brighter and closer, hovering near the shoreline across the lake. It moved slowly, almost deliberately, before disappearing behind a cluster of trees. A chill ran down her spine. Probably just another camper, she muttered to herself, though she hadn't seen any signs of other people nearby. Claire locked the door to the camping house and climbed into bed, leaving the lantern burning low on the table. At some point during the night, she woke to an odd sensation. The room felt colder than before, as if a draft had seeped in. She sat up, her eyes adjusting to the dim light of the lantern. That's when she heard it, a faint tapping on the window beside her bed. Her heart raced as she turned to look, expecting to see a branch or a bird. Instead, she saw the light again, glowing faintly just outside the window. It hovered for a moment before darting away, leaving her breathless and shaken. Too terrified to go back to sleep, Claire sat at the table with the lantern, trying to convince herself it was nothing. But the tapping returned, this time at the front door. It wasn't loud or forceful, just a soft, rhythmic knock. She froze, her pulse pounding in her ears. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. No answer. Summoning her courage, Claire grabbed a fire poker from beside the stove and inched toward the door. She peeked through the small window, but saw nothing. Slowly, she unlocked the door and opened it just a crack. The night was still, and the lake shimmered under the moonlight. But the light was back, this time directly on her porch. It hovered for a moment before darting toward the woods behind the cabin. Despite every instinct screaming at her to stay inside, Claire stepped onto the porch, drawn by a mix of fear and curiosity. She followed the light's path to the edge of the woods, where it seemed to linger, almost waiting for her. But as soon as she stepped closer, it vanished completely, leaving her in total darkness. Panicking, Claire turned to head back to the camping house, only to find the light behind her again, closer than ever. It flickered and danced, circling her like a predator toying with its prey. She bolted toward the cabin, locking the door behind her and barricading it with furniture. The light didn't return that night, but Claire barely slept, her ears straining for any sound. When dawn finally broke, she packed her belongings and left in a hurry, refusing to look back at the woods. Later, she learned the area was rumored to be haunted by spirits of miners who had drowned in the lake during the gold rush. Whether the light was one of them or something else entirely, Claire couldn't say. But the memory of that eerie, sentient glow still haunts her to this day. Story 3, The Shadow on the Ridge. Mark Hensley. Mark Hensley had always been a fan of rustic getaways. When his friend suggested a camping trip at a remote house deep in the Adirondack Mountains, he eagerly agreed. The camping house, perched on a rocky ridge, had a panoramic view of the forest below. It was old, creaky, and far from any cell service, but its charm more than made up for its isolation. The first evening passed uneventfully, with the group sitting around a fire, sharing stories and laughter under a canopy of stars. As the night deepened, they all retired to the camping house, exhausted from the day's hiking. Mark was the last to turn in, lingering on the porch to enjoy the crisp mountain air. That's when he saw it, a tall, shadowy figure standing at the edge of the tree line, barely illuminated by the glow of the dying fire. At first he thought it was one of his friends, but as he squinted to get a better look, the figure didn't move. It just stood there, motionless, watching. "Hey, who's out there?" Mark called, his voice echoing into the silence. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it seemed to dissolve into the darkness, leaving Mark questioning whether he had imagined it. Shaking off the unease, he doused the fire and went inside, locking the door behind him. That night, Mark dreamed of the figure. In his dream, it loomed closer, its face obscured by shadows, its presence heavy and suffocating. When he woke, he found himself drenched in sweat, the faint rustle of leaves outside the window, putting him further on edge. The next day, the group hiked to a nearby ridge. As they walked, Mark couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every now and then, he thought he caught a glimpse of movement in his peripheral vision, a dark shape slipping between the trees. But whenever he turned to look, there was nothing there. His friends noticed his unease. "You okay, man?" one of them asked. Mark hesitated but decided not to mention the figure. "Yeah, just tired," he lied. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the group returned to the camping house. They lit another fire, cooked dinner, and tried to laugh off the growing sense of unease that seemed to hang over them. Mark avoided the porch that night, opting instead to sit by the window, keeping a wary eye on the woods. Around midnight, a loud thud echoed from the roof of the house. Everyone froze. "Probably just a branch falling," one friend offered, though their voice betrayed their nervousness. But then came a second thud, heavier, deliberate. Mark grabbed a flashlight and cautiously stepped outside, his friends following close behind. They scanned the roof and the surrounding woods, but there was nothing there, just the oppressive stillness of the night. As they turned to go back inside, Mark spotted it again. The shadowy figure was back, standing at the edge of the ridge this time, closer than before. It was taller than any human, its outline distorted, as though it didn't quite belong to this world. "It's there," Mark whispered, pointing toward the figure. But when his friends looked, it was gone. Frustrated and unnerved, they decided to call it a night, locking all the doors and windows before retreating to their rooms. Mark couldn't sleep. Every creak of the old house, every gust of wind sent his nerves on edge. Then just as he was beginning to doze off, he heard it, a soft tapping on his bedroom window. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. Slowly, he turned his head toward the sound. The figure was there, its dark form pressed against the glass, its face still obscured. Mark stumbled out of bed, his shout waking the others. When they rushed into his room, the figure was gone, leaving behind only a single smeared handprint on the window. The group decided to leave at first light. As they packed, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. On the drive down the mountain, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw it one last time, standing on the ridge watching as they disappeared into the distance. The shadowy figure never followed them, but the memory of its oppressive presence stayed with Mark, a chilling reminder that some places are better left unexplored. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more creepy stories. Which of these stories gave you a chilling experience? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are real.